Hello and welcome to another episode of Gamecom, and today is a very special day. It is the 20th anniversary of Quake. Now this is a significant occasion because, well, Quake, I would say, started an era that I like to call the golden age of first-person shooters. Now the thing about Quake, one of the things that made it the beginning of the golden age of first-person shooters is the fact that it is the very first true 3D first-person game released. There were other 3D type of shooters. There was Duke Nukem 3D, there was id Software's own Doom, but the reality is that those games were using something that we call 2.5D engines, meaning that they had some 3D capability. They could give the illusion of 3D, but they had some limitations. One of those limitations, especially it was very prevalent in stuff like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, was that you couldn't have floors on top of each other, or different rooms on top of each other. In Doom you couldn't really look up or down. There were a lot of really weird limitations of the Doom engine, but it wasn't because the Doom engine wasn't a sophisticated game engine. It was mostly because computers back then weren't very powerful. id Software wanted to get their games to work on the current hardware so that you did not require extremely powerful hardware. In 1993, when Doom was released, the most powerful processor that you could get was from Intel, and it was the very first Pentium processor, but id Software wanted it to work on a 486 computer. Now in the case of Quake came out in 1996, which meant that Pentium processors were far more prevalent and were slowly becoming more and more affordable and more widespread. Because of this, id Software could push the technology a little bit further and spent quite a bit of time developing a very efficient engine, because even though Pentium was powerful, they still wanted the engine to be as efficient as possible so that they could push the graphical capabilities as best as they could, just like with Doom. A lot of people would say that Duke Nukem 3D, which was using the build engine, which is sort of similar to the Doom engine, had some, graphical advancements and benefits. It basically, a lot of people say that the build engine was so much more advanced, and why would id Software work on, a somewhat simple engine like what was used in Doom? Well, that's mostly because again, they needed it to work on a slower machine. But here's the thing, by the time Duke Nukem 3D came out using the slightly more advanced build engine, a few months later they released this. It blew the PC community away. No one has seen anything like this before. The only thing that we've seen that came close to this was what we were seeing from the PlayStation 1 at the time. And even then, the PlayStation was still maturing in terms of its graphical capabilities. Now, you guys might wonder, why am I playing this at such a low resolution? Everything looks so blocky and pixelated. Also, I'm playing this in software mode, and for those that don't know what software mode means, it basically means that I can only work with a limited color palette, and there's only 256 colors visible and that can be used. And not to mention, I've got the resolution set to 320 by 240. Now, why would I set this game so low? Well, because back in 1996, most people played the game like this. And this, four-part episode, yes, this is going to be a four-part episode of Quake. And the reason why I'm making it 4 parts is because I want to explore the different ways that people were exposed to Quake. Because when people think of Quake, they have different ideas of what Quake looks like and the way that it plays. Now, of course, some people would play the old way. Back in the 90s, the more common way of playing the game was using the right arrow keys and using controller, shoot, space for jump, alt for strafe, and shift for run. You know, it's kind of very primitive. Fortunately, Quake, gives you the ability to use the WASD mouse combo. So, in fact, Quake was the first game to standardize it, but its software did not standardize it. It was actually the fans, the hardcore players of Quake, that realized that the controls were actually limiting the player's capabilities. So, as you can see here, Quake does follow a lot of the rules seen in Doom. Somewhat linear level design. Well, it's sort of got a non-linear layout, but the way that you traverse these maps are very linear. You always have to get a key before you can progress to another part of the map. And of course there's secrets hidden throughout the places with some power-ups. Quake had introduced some new gameplay elements, and John Romero, who was one of the key designers of Quake, wanted to expand on the I guess you could say the more unique mechanics when compared to Doom. Doom had some basic triggers, and in fact I have a video, or not a video, an audio file that I've taken from an interview of Bioshock developer JP LeBreton. Now, this is found on the full interview, if you guys are interested, is on the Double Fine channel that talks about developers and the way they make games. So you can check that out. I'll put the link in the description below. But just a little segment I just want to put into this commentary that I think is actually quite interesting, the way that Quake handles triggers.
In making these games, we have triggers. Triggers do all kinds of stuff. Wolfenstein, I don't think, had triggers in it. And so we were doing all kinds of things, like lots of traps, lots of really cool stuff. But then it was like, I want some other triggers. So when we were making Quake, I came up with the idea of having a visual trigger that has nothing to do, well, it's a trigger that you place in the world, and everything, all the triggers in Quake were brush triggers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I wanted a special brush trigger that would only trigger when that brush was in your field of view. If I stick like a monster there that's hooked up to this, it knows that it can only be triggered by this being viewed.
Yep.
So it'd be a monster like waiting there in the dark or whatever, and you're just like looking around and you're like, what's over there? What the,
Yep.
And you could have walked right past it and nothing happens.
Yep.
But then you like look over there and then red eyes and you're done, right? So but nobody's done that yet.
Yeah.
And it's such an easy idea, and it's already in technology right now.
And that's just one example of the many unique things that they would do in Quake. I think that some of the secrets that you find in this game to be, some of it can be pretty elaborate. And the thing about Quake that I really like about this game is the level design. Here's the thing. Doom is a mixed bag. Both Doom 1 and Doom 2. Some of the levels are absolutely brilliant. Others, not so much. And I know that this might sound sort of fanboyish, but for me, John Romero is the best level designer. And you got other level designers such as Sandy Peterson, who, the design philosophies of his maps were pretty good, but the look of the maps I thought were actually kind of ugly. A lot of really boring, bland environments and stuff like that. And of course we got American McGee, who worked on Doom 2, and his maps were generally much better to look at, but unlike Romero's and Peterson's maps, were kind of infuriating to play through. Sometimes the key would be hidden in a really strange place, or sometimes you have to find a secret in order to finish a map. But the thing about Quake is that I think that all three of these, well, Romero has always been good, but Peterson especially, as well as McGee, has gotten really good at level design by the time they worked on Quake. Now, a lot of people say that Quake is just a rehash of Doom, but I like to think of Quake as a much more refined Doom. Now, some people would say that Doom should have been called, Quake should have been called like Doom 3, because they were very similar, they had a very similar premise. But the thing is that the style of the games were different, and the feel of the games were different, the controls were different. Like I said, this game is a true 3D game, so you have multiple, layers of environments and rooms and stuff like that. By the way, this is the secret to a secret stage. We're not going to go there. We don't have time to cover the whole episode. We're just going to go through several of them. But yeah, there's a lot of secrets in these maps. I actually do know where all of them are at, but I don't have time to go through all of them. I just want to keep this video somewhat brief and just touch on some of the more important things. For instance, going back to the design, is that Doom had sort of that kind of like music album art feel to it. It had a very strong sort of metal rock and roll style to it, whereas Quake is darker than that. It has more of a H.P. Lovecraft feel to it, and it turns out that that is indeed one of the major influences of this game. For those that don't know who H.P. Lovecraft is, just go look it up on Wikipedia. He's this author that creates a very interesting imagery with just the use of words. So I guess you could say that there's a lot of people that are inspired by H.P. Lovecraft that actually are doing a lot of interpretation. And some of the characters, in fact, in Quake are taken straight from his writings. If you play Quake, some of these creatures that you will run into, such as Shapnagara, I think she's called. It's like this big, horrifying beast, and there are many descriptions of her, and id Software tried to come up with their own interpretation of what she would look like. But in the story of Quake, Shapnagara is sort of the mother of all of the enemies that you encounter, I guess you can call. It's got a very strong supernatural, weird vibe to it. So stay tuned for part 2. But in part 2, we're going to take a look at a high resolution version of this game. Quake 1, again, has been experienced in many different ways, and we're going to experience those many different ways in the subsequent parts.